Hey, everybody, welcome back for another Wellbeing Wednesday. If you're new, welcome for the very first time. If you are coming back, welcome back. So this is the monthly segment that shows childcare providers and caregivers like yourselves simple ways to support your own well-being. My name is Susanna Creed. I'm your host. And this is also part of the Be Well Care Well program, which is here in Arkansas and also in South Carolina and New Hampshire. And that program is all about supporting staff wellness and the well-being of our child care providers. So I'm really excited about this month's theme. Since March is National Nutrition Month, we are going to be focusing on that, and we are going to celebrate and learn together. So dietary changes and making healthy nutrition choices, we know, can be challenging. But today we have Dr. Morris with us, who will help us identify some tips and some strategies that can help promote healthy nutrition. And we will also discuss how the ACE, or Awareness, Choice, and Execution health coaching framework, can be used to improve and sustain healthy dietary habits. So I'm glad to welcome back Dr. Duston Morris. You were with us last year. I'm so appreciative that you are willing to come back with us. And just really quick about Dr. Morris, he is an associate professor in health sciences at the University of Central Arkansas, and he also has an extensive background in coaching, physical wellness, physical activity, and he has a lot of different accolades behind him. So we're really thrilled that he was able to spend a couple minutes with us today, and I am going to just kick it over to Dr. Morris.
Hey, thanks, Susanna. It's always a pleasure seeing you again and being able to just get together and talk about things that are going to improve our quality of life and well-being. So I'm excited that we're spending some time again. I think we did this last year, if I remember right, didn't we? In 2023, I think we did some National Nutrition Month. So I'm excited that we're back together again this year. And as you said, we're gonna just kind of informally go through, have a presentation that we'll share with all the participants, whether you're live or you're gonna watch the recorded version. So you'll get this slide deck. And then you'll also have access to reach out to me directly if you want more information about tips and strategies related to healthy eating. So today what we're going to talk about are healthy eating strategies or healthy eating habits. And we're going to kind of break it down into kind of these four areas, right? So one, we're going to talk a little bit about what is healthy eating. We want to talk about how do we create consistency and sustainability in our eating habits, because we all can probably relate to the fact that, some days it's better, some days it's worse, or we kind of get on this kick of where we have, maybe a month or 2 months where we really feel like we've improved our diets and our dietary choices. And then we kind of slip back and we get back into some of those more unhealthy eating habits. So we'll want to talk a little bit about that. We'll kind of identify where habits come from and how they shape our dietary choices and our eating behaviors. And then we're going to get into, here in a few minutes, we're going to get into those tips and strategies to make those changes. So before we get to that fourth point, I want to come back to the first three. And let's just take a minute to think about what is healthy eating. So, Susanna, from your perspective, when you hear the words healthy eating, what do you think of?
It's a good question. It's been a while, actually, since someone has asked me that directly. When I think of healthy eating, I think kind of well-rounded. So not just protein, not just carbs, not just fast food, not just vegetables even, but kind of a mixture. I imagine a plate that kind of looks like a rainbow, where it's got some yellow, it's got some green, it's got maybe some purple in there, some red. So it just kind of a variety and well-rounded. Those are some of the first things that come to my mind.
Yeah, exactly. And so when we think about healthy eating and identifying what that looks like, it's going to be slightly different for everybody, right? And healthy eating kind of depends on where you are on that continuum of healthy eating, right? So as we get started and we start changing those habits, healthy eating might be just adding one or two things to your diet that might be more nutrient dense or have less fat or have less sugar. Whereas somebody that's farther along the line or down that continuum, where they've really developed that kind of that maintenance stage as it relates to healthy eating, they might have more of that rainbow plate. So really, when we start to identify healthy eating, we really need to capture where we are individually in that process and not necessarily compare ourselves to where somebody else might be in that process. So somebody, for example, that's been healthy eating for a number of years, they've created sustainability and maintenance in those patterns. It can be detrimental if we're starting and we look at what they're doing and say, well, we should be doing that, right? So we want to meet ourselves where we are in the process and realize that identifying what healthy eating is going to look a little bit different for each individual, but we can start small and we can work towards big. All right. So that's a really good, you make a really good point. So what do you think about like consistency and sustainability? How do we go about creating that consistency or sustainability kind of from your perspective?
I'm muted. Huh.
That's okay.
Zoom life. I was just asking when I coach people or when I'm for myself.
Well, whichever one you feel most comfortable talking about.
Okay. I'll just start from personal experience, kind of sharing that.
Sure.
So I'm not gonna lie, personally, consistency is one of my Achilles heels.
Well, that's a
I
hard
can
one for
start
everybody,
real
right?
strong. I've always been a sprinter. I've not ever been a marathoner. So, I'm very good at the beginning, but consistency can be a little bit challenging for me. And I think one of the things that helps is just keeping it small, like
Yeah.
one small change. And like, can I just do one thing? Like if I
Yeah.
can do one thing each day and keep that up for a bit, it's like, okay. And then can I add another thing onto that and kind of get into the habit of it? So kind of building on those small successes and just keeping it small and keeping it simple. Something that used to help me that I've kind of gotten off of was kind of this idea of do it anyways. Like I can feel like I
Yeah.
don't want to do it. That
Right.
doesn't mean that I don't do it. Like I can take my feelings with me as I take different actions because the actions can then help me feel better, which can then help me change my thoughts. And then the cycle continues. So those are a couple of things that I think of and do.
Yeah, those are great. And when you're talking about that, it reminds me that so much of consistency and sustainability comes from environmental change and accountability and support, right? So whether we're talking about healthy eating habits or changing our exercise habits, part of that is creating or attempting to create an environment and a support network around those change habits, right? That makes it a lot, and so it makes it a lot more doable for people because, as you mentioned, consistency and sustainability and eating habits is hard for all of us. We all wax and wane. Very few people are going to be tried and true to healthy eaters their entire life. And it's okay to give yourself grace and gratitude in that process and realize that it's an ebb and flow, but trying to create that environment around healthy eating habits and some support systems around that. And I'll come back to that in a little bit. What does that look like? And we're going to talk a little bit about geo shopping and accountability and support a little later on in our conversation today. So that leads me to the third point before we get into all of our tips and strategies today. So where do habits come from? Where do they come from? How do we create a habit? How do habits happen in our lives? And how do they shape our dietary choices and eating behaviors? So when you think about habits, from your perspective, Susanna, where do you think habits come from? Or if you can reflect on your own life, how did you fall into like maybe habitual process of eating healthy or unhealthy foods?
I think for me, it's a lot of time just kind of on instinct.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how some of them will start. Now, sometimes our instincts are spot on, and it's like, okay,
Yeah.
that was a great instinct to take an action. And then I kind of fall into that because instinctually that's what I go to. And then there's other times where maybe those instinctual habits might be the path of least resistance. It's what's available. It's where my mind just goes.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's not the habit that I want to keep or I want to build, but instinctually that's like what I gravitated towards. So I think without any real extra input from the environment, those are some of the things where it's like, okay, naturally, what is that tendency that without thinking where my brain goes and my body goes? And then there's the idea of shifting habits and becoming intentional about those habits. And that's where actually a lot of mindfulness can be good, with my yoga background, a lot of times people say mindfulness is like, oh, I have to have my brain be quiet. And what I've been coming back to, and this comes back to habits, is mindfulness is not about, is my mind blank, but it's saying, okay, I'm going to develop a practice of consciously shifting my attention. So maybe
Yes.
my attention is on that negative habit. And okay, mindfulness is saying, let me practice shifting my attention to something else. But
Yeah.
it's an active habit forming versus kind of that initial passive instinctual. And that's kind of my perspective on it.
Yeah, that's a great perspective because, one of the things when you're talking, it reminds me that habits are practice based, right? A habit is something that becomes kind of rote. It's something that we do without thinking. A lot of times when you ask people, what is a habit? Oh, it's something that I do and I really don't think about it. Even if we haven't thought about it or we get to the place that we don't think about it, it's still practice based. Because a habit is a behavior that's repeated frequently or over and over and over, at some point in time in our development of that habit, it had to be practice based, meaning that we had to do it over and over and over and over and over again in order for it to become something that we do without thinking, right? So when we think about healthy eating habits or lack thereof, we can create a habit based around thoughts. This is what you were talking about as to what we're going to do next, right? So if we're continually thinking about unhealthy choices or unhealthy food, we have a tendency to want to move in that direction. Where if we can be mindful and capture that awareness and be like, right now I'm thinking about a chocolate bar, but I just had one yesterday. So you're mentally processing this out through mindfulness. And you say, so today I might make a better choice and eat an apple, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be an easier choice, but it's the first step of a behavior change process that's important, which is having that contemplation or that awareness that you need to change that process, right? That thinking process. And so that's one aspect of where those habits come from. And the other is environmental, right? So many times, and this is something that happens to all of us, so many times our habits are formed based on what we see. We have a tendency to want to model behavior. So if we come from families or if we come from cultural backgrounds that basically kind of promote or support unhealthy eating habits, and we are a part of that from the time that we're small until the time that we're adult, we start to create habits based on that process as well. So there's a couple of different things in there that are going to cause habits to occur. And then, of course, based on that, they will shape our dietary choices and our eating behaviors. For example, if you take people that live in the South, in the United States of America, many times their palate is very different than that of people that are going to live in the Northeast or the Northwest. Our dietary choices are different, many times based upon where we come from. And so we have to be aware of those things, which is what you talked about just a few minutes ago. Being aware means being mindful of all of the things that influence and shape our dietary choices and eating behaviors. So that leads me to the fourth point, which we're going to spend the rest of our time today talking about. And it's the tips and strategies that we can use to make these changes that so many of us want to try to make, and the things that we've been talking about. So first of all, let's start with tip number one. Start with small changes, right? We've already talked about this just a little bit, that we have to really embrace the idea of and the power of gradual change. I think, Susanna, you mentioned a while ago, one of the things a lot of us like to do is it's kind of an all or none principle. I'm going to get rid of everything in my diet that is unhealthy, and starting tomorrow, everything is going to be clean and healthy. The literature doesn't support the sustainability of that, right? We might be able to do that for a day or two, but because we're restricting ourselves versus trying to do things in balance or moderation, most of the literature suggests that that doesn't work, that we're much better off looking at the small changes and doing those gradually over time. And there's a lot of power in that. So for example, one thing you could do is add one extra serving of veggies per day. Or maybe you're not eating any veggies at all. So you just start with one veggie per day, right? Versus one at every mealtime. You can switch from sugary drinks. If you're a soda drinker, you can switch from regular soda to diet soda, right? And again, I've worked with clients and they're like, well, I have 3 sodas a day. And it's like, okay, well, instead of trying to make all of them diet drinks, let's start with one of the 3. right? And it's really difficult for us to convince ourselves that small changes are powerful, but small changes that we do frequently actually lead to habit. And so there's a lot more sustainability in that process than trying to change everything at once. And another example would be, maybe reducing the number of sugary snacks somebody has in a day or in a week. So we know through the literature, we know through the research that small changes actually do lead to significant improvements over time. And the real key here is to have small changes that you do frequently. Because when we're trying to create behavior change process, one of the things that we need to do is engage in that new behavior very frequently. So that's why making a small change and doing it frequently, daily, if you can, is much more effective than trying to change everything at once and then trying to sustain that over time, because that's usually just too unrealistic and too unmanageable for all of us to move forward with that kind of process. So another tip that you just brought up, Susanna, is the whole aspect of mindful eating, right? So by definition, it really involves paying full attention to the experience of eating, the experience of drinking, and you want to be mindful of that both internally and externally. So I've had clients that will say, well, Dr. Morris, what does that mean? What does that look like? Well, internally, when you eat a certain food, how does it make you feel? Do you have an initial emotional feeling with that food? And is that how you're connected to it? Or is it a food that you eat and you realize a few minutes or a few hours later that the food really settles nicely into your body? For example, I love going to the movies. And I can tell you that when I go to the movies, my wife and I go to the movies, I want buttered popcorn layered with a tall medium. And when I say medium at the movie theater, they're gigantic anymore. And I want it with a root beer. And when I get that, man, immediately, right, internally, I get this sensation of like sweet and salty and buttery, almost makes your mouth water when I describe it, right? And you're eating it, and it's like, oh my gosh, this tastes so good. And I'm just putting it in, And 30 minutes later, I don't feel so well, right? And so if I'm mindful of that experience, it's not to say that I'm not going to eat popcorn and drink a soda at the movie, but I might manage the way in which I do it because I'm mindful of how it's impacting me internally, right? So I'm aware the initial taste and flavor is what I'm really after, but the way that it makes me feel later is not so rewarding or not. It's not a healthy experience. I feel slow or lethargic, or my belly starts to hurt, or it's like, oh, I just don't feel well after eating some of those foods. So that's me being internally aware of the process of eating. It tastes good here, but it doesn't have a good long-term feeling effect down here, right? So that's kind of an internal mindfulness approach. Externally, I'm asking myself, why am I eating this? Is this something that's important to me? Does it enhance the experience that I'm having? Am I eating it only because it's part of a social construct, meaning I'm at a wedding and there's wedding cake, and so I need to eat the wedding cake because I'm there? Do I really need to eat the cake? So there's this processing that goes on externally as to, again, paying full attention to the experience of why you're eating. And that's the best way that I can explain it when I work with my clients. I say, ask yourself the question of why. Why am I eating this now? And how does this help me improve my quality of life and well-being, right? And you have to have some deep experience with that. And that takes some practice. So that's the first point. Mindful eating also includes being fully present in the moment. So you can do that without judgment. So one of the things that I see a lot of times with my clients is they go and they're like, man, and I want to go to this party and there's going to be food there and I ate it and then I felt really horrible about eating it. And so they create a lot of negative emotion and negative attachment to what happened. No, if you're going to allow yourself the enjoyment of a social situation, such as a movie, and I'm going to enjoy my popcorn and I'm going to enjoy my root beer, right? But what I might do differently, instead of getting a large bucket, maybe I get a small sack or maybe a small drink, right? So there's ways that we can deal with those things without engaging in judgment about the way in which we're choosing to eat the foods that we're eating. And then you really want to tune into your hunger cues and your satiety cues. Are you really hungry? Why, again, it goes back to, why are you eating this food now? Are you hungry? So it's a physiological need, or are you just eating because it's more appetite? And appetite is more of a psychological desire for food. And we'll talk a little bit about that later on. And then we just really want to have that non-judgmental awareness of the physical and sensations of food, the thoughts of food, and the emotions related to eating food, right? So when we think about mindful eating, there's what do I get there? 5 key principles. There's being present in your eating, being aware of why you're eating, what you're eating. Don't judge yourself. Enjoy your opportunities to engage with food and be aware of why you're doing such. Have respect for your body. Realize that there is fact behind this, that there are some foods that are just basically better for the body than others. We know that if you go and eat McDonald's French fries and McDonald's hamburgers and drink gigantic Cokes all the time, that is not respecting the body, that you're putting in a lot of food that over time is detrimental to the body. So you have to have respect for your body. It doesn't mean that you can't enjoy some of those things, but it also certainly means that in order to respect the quality and well-being of your physical makeup, your physical body, you want to provide it with food that's very nutrient dense and very healthy. And then be grateful, have gratitude for the experience of eating, right? So when I work with clients, there's a gamut of foods that we're fortunate to have in our society. And a lot of us like a lot of different types of foods. Experience and be grateful for those foods. Do not go into eating with negative emotion or a judgment of who you are, but learn how to be aware of that process. So for example, for myself personally, if I go, let's say, and this is just the way I manage for myself, if we choose to go to the movie one night during the week, and maybe I love little Reese's peanut butter cups, the kind that are individually not wrapped, and they're in the plastic container. I like those with some popcorn and a soda. Well, if I go to the movie one night and I have that, I don't sit there thinking, oh my gosh, this is the worst stuff for me ever. I shouldn't be eating this. I feel so bad about myself. I'm such a loser. I'm never going to get it under control. That's not the way I approach it. I'm like, hey, I'm at a movie. This is fun. Man, this stuff tastes good. I'm really enjoying it. But I also know that for the rest of the week, I'm going to make some healthier choices, because although this food tastes good, I know it's not really respecting my body. So I take a very different approach as to how I look at food and the relationship that I have with food. And that's one thing that can help you make those healthier eating choices. So you want to plan and prepare, it should say, or you can say plan and plan ahead, right? Plan and plan a little bit more. So when we plan what we're going to eat, it helps us reduce chances of grabbing on the go. And our research shows us that when we wait until we're hungry to try to figure out what we're going to eat, chances are we make unhealthy food choices. So trying to plan ahead also saves us money, it saves time. It can help us have a better reliance on healthy foods and less reliance on unhealthy. Because if we're grabbing on the go, again, chances are we're grabbing something that's less healthy or more unhealthy for us than if we're actually planning that out. So planning what you're going to take for lunch, planning what you're going to have after you get home from work, all of those things are really important. And some tips for early planning and preparation: you can do batch cooking, creating a grocery list, prepping in advance. One of the things that I like to talk about, kind of coined this term, I think, is geo-shopping. And so geo-shopping is knowing how your favorite grocery store is laid out. And I'll give you a quick example of this. If you go into, let's just use a Walmart, because most Walmart stores are all kind of set up the same way. If you go into the Walmart store, what I tell my clients to do is to shop the exterior and not the interior. Now think about that. If you visualize a Walmart, when you walk into the Walmart, the exterior is usually not the aisles, but the exterior. When you first walk in, usually you see the fresh fruits and vegetables, and then you walk down the exterior side of the wall. That's where you're going to get your meats, your cheeses, your eggs, your milk. All of that is on the exterior, right? If you think about what's on the interior, the shelves, most of the shelves hold processed foods or high sugary foods or foods that have a lot more sodium. They're prepackaged foods. So this is geo shopping. It's knowing the location of where the healthy foods are in your favorite store, and you shop more in those areas, and you stay out of the areas where there's less healthy food. And that's one thing that you can really start to do, is identify that and how your favorite store is laid out, and try to stick to the areas where you've got more healthy food choices. Another tip is portion control. So one of the things that I like to do with clients is I like to say, hold up your hand and make a fist. All right. Now, this is hard for a lot of people to believe, but just go ahead and do that now. If you're with us today, just make a fist. Take a look at your fist. Now, you're probably not going to believe this, but your stomach, before you stretch it out with a whole lot of food, is about the size of your fist. Now, if we were all together in the same room, and I do this in my classes, and I'll have some big people get, big guys like our football players get up there with some of our smaller students, and I'll say, okay, I'll make a fist. All of our fists are different sizes. Well, all of our stomachs are different sizes. So if you think about the size of your stomach, it's about the size of your fist. So realistically, if you want a full stomach, you just need to put enough food in your stomach that will fill up about the size of your fist. Well, some people will say, well, hey, Dr. D, I can eat a whole lot more food than that. Well, of course you can. And that's because your stomach will stretch. But a lot of the reasons that people have acid reflux or gastroesophageal reflux disease is because they eat too much food. They stretch their stomach out to 2 to 3 sizes of its actual size, and it puts a lot of pressure on the other internal organs. So one of the things that you can do is when you're eating your food, you can say, do I have about a fist-sized portion of everything I want? And so what you're wanting to do is eat smaller portions and eat more frequently. Again, that helps create habit. So to help manage with that, you can also go with a smaller plate. You can also measure your food out, or you can be mindful of the types of food that you're eating. So I gave a picture there, and you can see that there are, what we've got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pancakes. A serving size there is not 5, but it would be those 2 top the pancakes on the top. That would be about a serving size. You can leave all the berries if you want, and you certainly want to limit the syrup that you put on it, right? So use your fist. This is a great way to look at it. Another way is to think about a spoon. So if you make your hand, I don't know if you can see my hand or not on the screen, but if you make your hand kind of into like a cup or a ladle, that's about the amount of serving of something you want to have. So it would fit in your hand and you could put it on your plate. And if you think about a bowl, you just kind of open your hand up like this. And so if you think about the bowl sitting down inside that, with that being the amount, a level bowl full of something, that's what you would want to eat. So I always tell people, if you like cereal for breakfast, right, this is your bowl. That's how much cereal you would want to eat as a serving, not a bowl like this that's this deep. Right. So one of the things that we've done, and this gets back to habit, is our environment creates what we believe is a portion size, and they're not accurate portion sizes, which can lead to unhealthy eating habits as well. And then we want to listen to ourselves. Ask yourself this question before you eat. Am I really hungry? And sit on that for a minute. Are you really hungry? You need to be able to distinguish the difference between appetite, which is the psychological desire for food. You look at something, somebody talks about something, you smell something, therefore you think you should eat. That's more of a psychological desire. Or are you physically hungry? And that's the actual physical need for food. So you have to know the difference. When we have bored eating, when we have social eating, when we have emotional eating, those are all more based on appetite. When the belly's rumbling and after you've drank some water to make sure you're not dehydrated, if your belly continues to rumble or you got that hunger pain, that's a physical need for food. Most of the time in our society, we eat a lot based on appetite and not on physical hunger. So being mindful and aware of the differences by listening to what your body's telling you can really help you make better choices as it relates to eating patterns and eating habits. And then you want to eat the good stuff, right? The nutrient-dense stuff versus the caloric-dense stuff. And so if you look to the left, you see the sandwich with the orange and a couple of tomatoes and some nuts. That's very nutrient-dense. Those are the kind of foods, quite frankly, that actually many times have fewer calories but more nutrients. And the nutrients, the vitamins A, D, E, and K, all the micronutrients and the micro and the macronutrients, all of those are really important to sustaining a healthy body and body function. And then the calorically dense things, the pictures kind of in the middle or to the right, although they taste good, and we shouldn't restrict ourselves from having it in its entirety, we have to remember that those are the things that don't really respect the body in regards to helping the body be as healthy as possible. So those are going to be foods that are very calorically dense, but they're not nutrient dense. So they got a lot of sugar, they got a lot of fat, but they don't have a lot of good micro or macronutrients, and we want to try to limit those in our daily eating habits. And then moderation versus restriction. So first of all, you want to create a balance of moderation, right? It's okay to have a little bit of your favorite unhealthy food. You want to enjoy your cheat foods without guilt. Remember, if you're going to the movie or whatever it is for you, and you're having some food that you know is not the best for you, don't sit there and beat yourself up over it. Enjoy the process. Embrace the environment. Embrace the situation. But also in the back of your mind, excuse me, realize that it's also something that you can't do all of the time because it's not respecting your body in relationship to healthy eating. And then finally, it's find the balance between indulgence and nourishment. It's okay to have a little bit of butter popcorn that's layered and a little bit of soda, or every once in a while have that, the hamburger or French fries from your favorite fast food restaurant. That's okay. But we also have to know that that food is more calorically dense and it's not nutrient dense. And we have to find the balance between indulging in those things that aren't healthy for us and finding those foods that nourish the body and really help us live our best lives. And then the last thing I want to talk about is what's called the ACE framework. So when we think about ACE, it's awareness, choice, and execution. And we can relate this to any behavior change. We talk about this in health coaching a lot. The first thing you want to do is be aware, right? So if your goal is to lose weight or eat healthier foods, you have to determine the differences between what you're currently doing and what your desired behavior is, right? So what is your current behavior? What is your desired behavior? And what are the things that are limiting you to reaching that desired behavior, right? So when I work with my coaches, I always say, what's the gap between the current behavior and the desired behavior? So for example, if you say, well, I want to, my expected outcome is I really would like to lose some weight. Okay, well, what do you need to do that? Well, if it relates to eating, you would say, well, I need to eat better food. Okay, well, that's your desired behavior. Then I might say, well, what are you currently eating? Well, I like a lot of processed foods. I like to go out and eat at fast food restaurants, and I like a lot of sugary foods. And I say, okay, well, those are your current behaviors related to your desired behavior. Then I would say, what limits you in achieving your desired behavior? It's the why. So when you're trying to create your awareness, look at what you're currently doing. Don't beat yourself up over it. Look at where you would like to be, and then ask yourself the questions of, why am I not there? What are the barriers, real or perceived, or the interference that creates kind of this incongruency between what you're doing and what you would like to achieve, right? And then make some choices. What are some things that you're ready to work on now? It can't be something that a coach tells you or a registered dietitian tells you or a personal trainer tells you. It has to be something that you're ready to try. Readiness to change is huge, and it comes from within. And then you want to have a positive attitude about it. Realize that it's not going to be a perfect journey. Realize that you're going to have some ups and some downs, right? Start small. Give yourself some grace and gratitude along the process. And then when you figure that out, start to put that into action. What's your plan? When are you going to start? How are you going to implement it? And these are a lot of things that a health coach can help you with, but you can certainly use this framework. This is what we use in health coaching to really sit down and jot this out for yourself. What are your current behaviors? What are your desired behaviors and your expected outcomes? What do you want to start working on now? Give yourself some grace. Be positive about the process. Realize it's slow and it takes time, and figure out a plan. When are you going to start? Exactly what is it that you're going to do? How are you going to keep yourself accountable? These are all things that fit nicely into this framework. And then finally, support and accountability. We know that behavior is much more attainable and sustainable when we do it together, right? Join a cooking class, follow a social media group that's all about dietary habits or healthy eating. Work with a health coach, see a registered dietitian, work with a personal trainer, get a couple of friends that want to try to, go after this goal with you, create a challenge, talk about it, text about it, email about it, call about it. Anything that you can do to create support and accountability around your behavior change process is typically going to help you become more successful and have a more positive experience. And then finally, look, celebrate your accomplishments, right? Remember, all accomplishments, large or small, should be recognized. And we have a tendency in our country to believe, in our society, that if it's not a gigantic accomplishment, it's not worth recognition. That's completely wrong. Every small step leads to a big outcome. We need to recognize those small movements as well as we do those large ones. Remember that changing habits is challenging. It can be tough, but be gracious, be kind to yourself, realize that it's a process and it's a journey, and enjoy it. And then share your success and your failures with your support group, those people that help you stay accountable. What are you struggling with? What are you having success with? Because a lot of people are having those same experiences, and they can not only empathize with you in that process, but also give you some other tips and pointers along the way. And that remember that failure is not loss, but it's actually growth. When you fail, you learn, and when you learn, you grow. And that's what I would like to leave you with today. So just kind of want to wrap it up there and see if there are any questions from those people that might be joining us live.
I think we're all just enthralled in taking it in from what you shared. It's wonderful for everybody who's watching either live or watching the replay later. The link to the presentation that Dr. Morris shared with us is in the chats. So you should be able to click on that and follow along at any point. And, you know, if you're in Be Well, Care Well already, please know that you can reach out to your coach about these types of things. That's what we're here for. We're here to support you. I've also put in the comments some more information about reaching out to Dr. Morris and about UCA's health coaching programs, as well as more information on National Nutrition Month. But really, I think you answered most of our questions as we were going. This has been wonderful. I've loved having you with us, and hopefully we can have you back again in the future. We would love to do that.
Yeah, I'd love to, Susanna. You know, in my years of experience with this, I think the biggest thing that when we think about our health and our well-being is that with most clients that I've ever worked with over decades now is when we can start to embrace the journey and realize that it's not about necessarily a predicted outcome, right? Because our outcomes will change over time, right? When we can really start to embrace the journey and realize that it's a growth process, we really start to find our lane, right? And so many times what happens is it's like, well, I didn't lose that 10 pounds that I wanted, or, well, I fell short because I was doing really well and yesterday it all went awry, right? I think understanding that it's more about the journey than it is the final outcome really helps people find their lane, and in the long run, which, because it's what we're really working on, that's where the success occurs, right? And so I would just encourage everybody just to work with people that can help you with this. Find the things that you're ready to work on and be patient with yourself in that process.
I love that. I'm definitely going to take that and put that in my back pocket for myself as well, because we all could use a reminder and we all can use support and accountability.
Absolutely.
So I think that's great. Awesome. Well, thank you. And thank you all so much for sticking with us today. This was just such good information. I wanted to make sure you all had it. But for right now, please feel free, if you're watching the replay later, to add your comments, any aha moments, any questions that you have, and we'll get back to you on that. And if you have not already, just make sure to follow Curricula Concepts and even UCA, just so you make sure that you're informed about any of the events that we've got going on, any other resources that we collectively can share. So once again, thank you so much, Dr. Morris, for being with us today. And thank you all for being here with us. And this has been another Wellbeing Wednesday. And I'm your host, Susanna Creed, wishing you all well today. Bye.
Bye-bye. My pleasure.